Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm joined today by Melanie Smith, who is a speaker, a YouTuber, among many other things in the nonprofit space. We here at Click and Pledge have gotten to know her well over the last few months and the work that she's doing. We were first exposed to her from her work on YouTube, so we're really excited to have her today, and we just want to get to know her a little bit better and help you get to know her as well. So Amber, thanks so much for joining us. If you want to just introduce yourself and share a little bit about what your work currently looks like.
Yeah, so let me take you back in time a little bit because I started my journey in the social impact world on the nonprofit side of things, of course. I was volunteering a lot in college, and then I started a nonprofit and had been leading that organization for many years when I started getting a lot of questions from people about how to successfully fundraise, lead a nonprofit, etc. So then that led me to YouTube, where I started creating content to answer those types of questions. And today, though I'm not with my nonprofit anymore, I'm focusing on creating that educational content to hopefully help other people who are in the nonprofit and social impact space. So that was kind of a long answer, but hopefully that provides some context.
And so, what was the process like for you, kind of being a part of that, and then sort of transitioning out to what you're doing now? And you mentioned that you were getting a lot of questions. Was that something that happened right away, or was that more of a longer process?
As you start to grow a nonprofit and gain some traction, and people start to take notice and they wonder what lessons can be learned from that. So I think a couple years in, I started getting questions here and there. People who were interested in taking their own passions and starting a nonprofit of their own, or figuring out how to successfully recruit volunteers, since that was something we were especially good at my organization. And as I got all these questions, I was happy to have a coffee meeting here and there to answer them. But I realized that YouTube could be a great platform because it was likely that lots of other people had the same questions, and maybe I could answer them for lots of people at one time.
And so, was that what do you think? How do you think that positions you in a unique way to have had that experience of actually starting your own nonprofit and experiencing a lot of the issues firsthand that people are now curious about?
If there's one thing I've learned from YouTube, it's that people seem to appreciate a personal connection to the topic. I mean, sure, random people could talk about nonprofits, but when I try to educate people on nonprofit topics, I'm calling upon my experiences, and I can speak from the things that I've personally done and just share my own learnings and acknowledge it's going to feel different for everyone, but at least I have empathy because I know what it's like to be you in the nonprofit world.
And I feel like just in my personal experience getting to know you in recent months, it sounds like animals are a big passion of yours. Talk me through how you kind of became passionate about them and making sure that they are well cared for.
That's so funny. So I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking about how as you get older, sometimes you return to the things you loved as a child. And I think maybe animals were like my first cause that I cared about. I remember going to grocery stores with my mom, and in the corner of the store, right after checkout, there'd be these big barrels, and on the barrels would be a picture of a really sad, hungry dog. And I would just beg my mom at the cash register to let me take a few dollars and go buy a bag of food to donate in the barrel. So I do have memories of that being one of the first causes I was passionate about. But I think for me, I just feel like everything's interconnected, and there's so many issues and topics I want to cover. I might be tackling animal rescue topics now, but in the future, I want to look deeper with my audience into food insecurity and homelessness and environmental sustainability, because all of these issues are connected to one another.
And kind of going off of that, do you feel like overall in the nonprofit space that there's an adequate understanding of that and of how intertwined so many issues are, or do you feel like it's kind of siloed and we have a lot of room to improve in that understanding?
That's a really interesting question. I've personally observed both. I think the issue is these problems are huge and they're complex, and it can feel very overwhelming to feel like you have to tackle all of the interconnected issues. And as one organization, you don't have to necessarily do that. You should focus on your niche and what you're really great at and excel at making that deep social impact. But there is something to be said about how we can better collaborate as a sector. I'm seeing more and more examples of this here in my hometown, Raleigh, North Carolina. There are organizations coming together to pull their collective power for homelessness and education. So organizations tackling different aspects of education. You've got the organizations focused on making sure the kids in school are getting meals to those who are focusing on after school tutoring. They're all coming together and starting to look at the issue as more of a system than happening in those silos that you referred to. And I think that there's an acknowledgement that that's needed, but pulling it off is hard. So, more and more tools that we can put out there to help with that, I think, are going to be very valuable going forward.
And of course, social media gets plenty of hate, but how do you feel like that can be a tool and kind of the platform that people like you have to be able to kind of help those connections happen?
Social media, I think, is about going where people are, right? Gosh, I just read something like, don't quote me on this because I need to check this, but I feel like I just saw a statistic that said 80% of people are on social media every week, maybe every day. That would not surprise me at all.
Yeah.
And if that's where people are, we have to go where they are to reach them. And it's hard to cut through the noise too. So I think really understanding the audience on social media and how to frame a topic in a way that is interesting and reaches them is a great gateway to learning about the rest of your cause as a nonprofit.
And since you transitioned to more of that space on YouTube and speaking, what has it meant to you to kind of experience some of the power of that community that you've been able to foster?
Very early on with YouTube, I was shocked to be receiving messages from people across the country and across the world. I was like, I hope some people are watching these videos, but people were, and they were interested and they were passionate and they were reaching out. And people often email me. Every week, I get dozens of emails from folks who are passionate about hunger and poverty and so many different issues. And they just want to share what they're working on and see how they can ramp up their social impact. So I think I wasn't expecting, but have been very delighted by the ability to connect to change makers all over.
And so, of course, we see the word changemaker there behind you. We see that on a lot of your stuff. Talk to me about kind of how that came to you and what that word means to you and the work that you do.
I think there's this theory in education, and I don't remember the name of it, so I'll have to look it up. But there's a theory in education that says if you can help a student own an identity, that they will be more likely to behave in accordance with that identity. And so I love to call members of my audience change makers because what I found is that sometimes they don't think of themselves as change makers yet. But if they can start to internalize the fact that they can be and are, in fact, change makers, that then they'll have the confidence to go out and act as change makers act, which is you see a problem, you do your research to figure out how the problem works, its root causes, and then you galvanize others around you to go out and take action to address that problem.
And so, for your army of change makers, is there a topic or two that kind of tends to come up more often than not? Is there kind of an issue that you see across the board that people are facing more often?
Fundraising is a huge one. I would say the majority of the questions I get on my nonprofit themed videos are about fundraising. And I get it because that's one of those aspects of the nonprofit world that is very mysterious and is very different from the business and for-profit world.
Do you feel like there is more of a spirit of competition among nonprofits, or that there really is more of a sense of community and teamwork?
I think it's a mixed bag, and it might depend on the issue area as well. Funding is hard. It's hard and it's getting harder. And I think that it can be tempting for people to feel more competitive in those situations. But there are also examples that I see in my own community of organizations teaming up and partnering and going after funding together, and having some success with that, building coalitions and having some of that collective impact structure. So it's there. The competitiveness is there. We're human beings. We have anxieties, we have fears. We don't know sometimes how we're going to meet payroll for a nonprofit staff the next month, or how we're going to serve all of the clients who are on our wait lists. Those fears are there for sure. But I think when we can get out of our heads and team up with others and figure out how we fit together in the puzzle pieces of the nonprofit world, that there's potential for greater funding capacity together too.
And do you have anything that has kind of over your career so far that has gotten you through some of the harder or the more isolating times of nonprofit work?
I think when you can have one or two other people who get it in your circle and who you can just be totally transparent with and share whatever's on your mind, that really goes a long way. So, community, those close relationships, and that trust and that confidentiality when you want to talk about anything you want to, because it is hard sometimes, but people like that make it better.
All right, Amber, is there anything else that we didn't cover that you wanted to talk about?
Just that if you're watching this and you feel like you have questions or challenges that you're facing, I hope that you'll share them with me because I want to know what's on your mind, and I'm always looking for more topics to cover too.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Amber. We really appreciate your time. If you haven't checked her out on YouTube, go ahead and do that. You won't regret it. Thanks, Amber. We'll see you soon.
Thanks.